So we'll begin our time together with some meditation. Today we're going to talk about VIRIYA, the second IDDHIPADA. And so we'll put a little attention on that in the meditation, since the IDDHIPADA are spoken of by the Buddha as ways of entering or increasing samadhi. So we'll start by attending to our posture. Sitting comfortably or lying down, whatever is most useful for your body at this time. We want to notice which postures are helpful when, and to use those that are helpful in having the energy of being attentive and clear, being relaxed and at ease. And so for many of us, the sitting posture is the best. But for some, walking meditation is more effective. For some people, lying down is very helpful. Standing also is a valuable posture that can give us a lot of strength, actually, and stamina. But in any case, the spine is straight, not rigid, but aligned. Sometimes people ask what to do if they have scoliosis, and of course, you don't have to do anything. I also happen to have scoliosis. It's not about the physical spine as much as the energetic channels being open and clear. Allowing the arms and hands and legs and feet to be relaxed in a position that's comfortable. You might pull your chin in a little bit and down. It helps to open up the back of the neck, right below the skull. But if you do that, do it in a way that's comfortable, not forced. If the chin is too far back, we tend to think too much. If the head is sagging forward, we fall asleep. So in general, the chin is level with the ground. Maybe pull back just a little bit. Now we bring our attention to any part of the body that feels tense. You might notice some muscles that are tensed up, and you can just invite them to relax. When you're meditating, sometimes you can notice that a thought arises and then a muscle tenses up in the body somewhere. Just being very kind and attentive and gently relaxing, gently letting go. Then if you're using the breath as a meditation object, you might immediately go to the breath and even use it as a support for relaxing the body and as a support for tuning into the whole body. And breathing in and breathing out, fully aware and present, establishing mindfulness. Today we'll put a little extra effort or a little extra attention on our energy, so we can kind of take our energetic temperature. There's the energy of the body, there's the energy of the mind. And how is it now? Sometimes the body is tired, but the mind is very energetic. Sometimes the body is energetic and the mind is sluggish. But we like to bring them both into a kind of balanced, not too much and not too little, and just right, or within a certain range of what's just right, so that we can be alert and attentive, but also calm. So the effort that we put in is steady, consistent, and persistent. As we stay consistently with our attention on the breath, or whatever object you may be using, we try to keep it there in a steady mode of attention, steady and strong, present, aware, clear. And also at ease, peaceful, happy, calm. And let the body and the mind enjoy the meditation. curious and interested in what might arise. If you're feeling dull or sleepy, you can bring to mind something that calls for more energy, more interest, maybe more appreciation. Appreciation for your life, for your breath, for the Dhamma, for the Buddha. If the energy of the mind is strong, agitated, not the strong in the steady sense, but overly excited, overly restless, you could consider something like the fact that we're all going to die. That this is the natural way. Such thoughts can cause the mind to sober up, to begin to be more serious, more calm. More focused. Finding the balance. Happy and at ease with the reality of the way things actually are. Staying with the meditation object and letting the experience unfold. right, welcome back. So I'm going to talk a little about Virya, so energy. The second Iddhipada, or basis of spiritual power or psychic potency. And the Buddha talked a lot about energy. It's extremely important to the practice and to our development. He included some word meaning energy in most of the lists of the factors or wings to awakening, the Bodhipakya Dhammas. And Virya has this kind of idea of vigor or strength. Sometimes it's called manly strength. Us gals can kind of relate, but it's this idea of really being strong and energetic. And the Buddha also talked about it having to be in balance, that the energy is the right amount. So he teaches about that when he talks about the simile of the lute, tuning the strings just right, not too tight, not too loose, not going at it too hard, not being lazy. And he says that this teaching is for the energetic, not for the lazy. The Dhamma development doesn't work without really applying ourselves. And it's really consistent through the whole sort of description or the way Dhamma works. This is not a philosophy. Well, I don't think of it as a philosophy anyway. I think of it as what the Buddha reported from his own direct experience. But the way it works is that it's not up to someone else to, take care of us or save us or anything. It's really up to us, each of us. So we have to apply ourselves. And that's how we develop. And that's how we gain our own happiness and freedom. So this idea of how much energy to apply and when and how we assess our own energy, this is important. This is an important investigation. So we need to get to know ourselves. When do I need to bring up more energy, maybe get some physical activity going, or maybe some mental activity, maybe investigation of the Dhamma, or thinking about the beautiful qualities of the Buddha and the Sangha, and these kinds of things that might bring more life to our practice, to the way we're feeling at the moment. And then there are other times when we need to calm ourselves down, take it a bit more steadily, be steady and consistent. And this isn't only about restlessness and dullness or drowsiness, the hindrances. That's part of it too. But it's also about applying ourselves with a kind of intentional consistency that helps us to really make progress in practice. Steadiness. And I thought I would share a sutta where the Buddha talks about developing the Iddhipadas, but first, before he, I'm going to look for that. I'm going to quick bring it up so you can see it. Before the Buddha talks about the Iddhipadas in this sutta, he talks about 15 things. And we're going to take a look at that. So I'm going to just share the screen as I find the sutta, so everybody has a chance in case you don't know how to use Sutta Central. Having a little display confusion, excuse me, it's coming. So I think now you can probably see, I'm going to go to Sutta Central, select the basket of discourses. This is in the middle length discourses. So the Majjhima Nikaya collection. And I think it's in the first 50. And I think it's number 16, if I remember right. So we'll go into this section. Sorry if the scrolling is making you dizzy. Yes, emotional barrenness. Now we're going to take Bhikkhu Sujato's. I'm going to remove the Pali for the moment, make it easier for us to read. And this sutta, when Venerable Nyanamoli translated it, he called it Wildernesses of the Heart. And Bhante Sujato uses emotional barrenness. So when I think about emotional barrenness, it's like, well, I have a young person in my life that sometimes says that sometimes the way she sees people moving through the world, it's like they're dead inside. And I think this kind of applies here. This is like, there's a wilderness inside, or there's an emotional barrenness. And here the Buddha talks about how to let that go or how to overcome that. And this is not to say that this is what we are experiencing, but since he talks about the Iddhipadas at the end here, we can think about how overcoming these, or either overcoming or inviting the positive side of these qualities, brings up energy or balances energy, and also how it helps us to develop then these qualities that are going to deepen our meditation and bring us to awakening. So he talks about 5 kinds of emotional barrenness, and they're fairly straightforward. It's when someone doubts the Buddha, they're uncertain, undecided, and they're lacking confidence. And so their mind doesn't incline toward keenness, commitment, persistence, and striving. So again, we have this idea of striving or energy, persistence. And we have to be a little careful because, as I've been saying, we need to bring this into balance and know that if we strive, if we think, oh, I've got to really strive and push, we may not be preparing the mind in the way that's needed for insight to arise, because we're trying to figure it out or push through it on our own. So it's an important distinction to recognize that we want to put in the causes and conditions for awakening, but we can't make awakening happen through our own pushing for it. The pushing has to be a kind of, the striving has to be a kind of gentle, consistent effort. So doubts about the teacher, then doubts about the teaching, doubts about the Sangha, and doubts about the training. These are the kinds of things that can kind of keep us dead inside. And also being angry or upset with our spiritual companions, resentful and closed off. So we can look at ourselves, he's talking about, mendicants in the monastic sangha, but we can also be thinking about how this comes up in our own life and how that can hold us back from having the energy, from having the openness and the readiness, and of course the other factors of the Iddhipadas, the kind of desire or enthusiasm that we talked about last week in Chanda, and also the clarity of mind that we'll talk about next time, or the ability to investigate in a way that's fruitful. So those are the 5 kinds of emotional barrenness. And then he talks about 5 emotional shackles to cut off: being free of greed, desire, fondness, thirst, passion, and craving for sensual pleasures. Being free of greed for the body. You're not free of greed for the body, or free of greed for form. And then he talks about, eating as much as you want until you're full, and, kind of being lazy, sleeping, drowsing. And then the last one of this set of 5 is a hope to be reborn in a heaven realm as one of the devas or gods. And because of these kinds of things, we don't really apply ourselves with energy, keenness, and commitment. So when he says, if we haven't given up this emotional barrenness or cut off these emotional shackles, it's not possible to achieve growth, improvement, and maturity in the teaching and the training. So when he says you have given it up, so he goes through the same list with no doubts about the teacher, the teaching, the teaching meaning the Dhamma, the Sangha, the training. We're not angry or upset with our companions. And we've also given up the greed and desire, etc., for sensual pleasures, for the body, for form. We're eating the right amount, not so much that we're sluggish, and not indulging in sleep in a way that makes us sluggish. Of course, again, it needs to be the right amount. You have to eat enough for the body to be healthy, to be comfortable enough. We have to sleep enough to be alert and awake. But I think maybe I know for myself that it's possible to eat and not eat so much that the body is just kind of dull, or sleep so much that there's a dullness rather than a real vigor there. Letting go of some idea that basically from the Buddhist point of view, according to the Dhamma, this idea of being reborn in the realm of the gods is a lesser goal, and it keeps us from really making the effort to awaken. So when he says, once we've gotten past all these things, then developing the Iddhipadas, the basis of psychic power for samadhi or immersion due to chanda, enthusiasm, and also due to energy. And mental development here is chitta, and inquiry is vimamsa. And then he has these other 5 factors. So you're doing this, including, the 4 Iddhipada, and then the 5th factor is sheer vigor. So again, it's kind of adding in energy yet again. And then this lovely simile of the chicken with 8, 10, or 12 eggs. And she sits on them and keeps them warm. And she doesn't have to wish for them to break out of their shells with their claws and beak and hatch safely. She doesn't have to think about it at all, and they break out safely. And he says the same thing is true for us, for the practitioners. We possess these 15 factors, including the IDDHIPADA and vigor. We can break out, become awakened, and reach the supreme sanctuary. So when I think about, what are the kinds of things that we can use to bring the energy up or to calm it down, I think some of these are a bit of a sign, really thinking about the beauty of the Dhamma, the way it's so complete and consistent, the way we can apply it to every aspect of our life, the incredible efforts of the Buddha and what he did and how he taught, and how amazing it is that we have this available to us even now, to really appreciate that there is, that there are enlightened beings alive today, that this is available to us, that there is a training that happens regardless. You don't have to be in a monastery. You don't have to be following a certain program. By inclining the mind, opening the heart to being trained, things happen that show us the way, that open up. And it seems like I really have this experience myself, and I know that this is true for others too. It's like you keep saying yes to the things that are good, things that are wholesome. And then it's like things arise that help us understand how to proceed in the practice. And that's really what I believe is the training. It's the training of the Dhamma. It's not a course that somebody makes up. It's not a particular place or a particular teacher even. It's really much bigger than that, much more available to us than any specific kind of thing. And to recognize that, all of these things that the Buddha mentioned can be thought of in this way of how does this affect my energy, the orientation of my mind, so that I can really set aside the things that hold me back and encourage the things that help me to move forward. Now, one of the issues we have, especially in Western culture, I'm not so familiar with how it is in like Buddhist countries where people have been conditioned from the beginning in Buddhism, but because there do seem to be differences. But here in the West, we tend to often push harder than we should. We really work hard and hold that as a high value. And I think a lot of times just worry way too much. Like we really do a lot of beating ourselves up. And so sometimes when we think about, how we should be striving, we just add more of that intensity and kind of feeling like we have to push harder. And it doesn't really work. It doesn't work in the sense that the mind doesn't become happy and at ease. It doesn't become relaxed in a way that we can be open and and available to the subtleties of the Dhamma arising. So I do think that we need to take special care about that. And also the way in which we can feel like we're not doing enough. Like so often we may think, oh, am I doing enough? I'm not doing enough. And one time I was having a conversation with Ajahn Pasano about that. And he said, well, if you ask that, the answer is always no. So just be aware of that trap. and just recognize that we can really with kindness, we can look more closely at what our body and mind might need, or what helps or what doesn't help. And sometimes those things change, especially as we age and our situation changes. And we can become very skilled at knowing how much to rest, how much to eat, how much exercise to do at any particular point, what to turn our attention to, and what to let go of. And setting aside some of those things, like, our dissatisfaction with people around us, or our dissatisfaction with the world, those things are going to always hold us back. And yet it's also valuable, important, necessary to be aware of what, is happening, so we can be discerning and wise about how to relate to it, but then to set it down. So these are some thoughts on VIRIYA and how we might use it. And in this case, when the Buddha talked about the IDDHIPADAs, he was talking about these qualities as basis for samadhi. But of course, we can use this in any aspect of our life. To accomplish anything, we need to have energy. And if we develop the skill and having the right amount of energy applied in a good way, we can make beautiful progress. So I'm gonna end my comments right there. And I want to hear what you have to say, what your experiences are, maybe even what you see happening with other people. Yes, Karen?
Hi, thanks for that. I had a question for you, because you hit something on the head that's happening with me when we were having our meditation. I often feel like the body's really calm. I can feel sensations. I usually get this light buzzing throughout the body, and it feels really good.
Yeah.
But my mind is really resistant to settling down.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do this. Let's get going. We got to do this. Come on, and how do I work with that? I really feel really stuck right now in my meditation in that spot, dealing with that almost every single meditation.
Yeah. So one thing is to develop the consistency of staying with the meditation object. So are you using the breath?
Yeah, I use the breath.
Yeah. So when the mind starts to do that, it's probably the case that you've lost track of the breath. And a gentle reminder. So seeing if you can really identify, feel the difference between the part of the mind watching this experience and the part that's the chattering, overly energetic thinking mind. And stepping back more into that wisdom aspect of the mind, or the part that's watching. and seeing that chattering part as more of the child that we want to try to calm. And
Is it okay
so,
to talk to yourself?
what?
Is it okay to talk to yourself, like to say,
Yes.
you can get to that later, you can do that later, stay with me.
Mhm.
Right?
We even see this in the biography of Ajahn Chah and Stillness Flowing, how he had these conversations with himself and he'd play both sides. And, I mean, I do find this valuable. You can even give yourself a bit of a Dhamma talk there. It's like, just really encouraging the mind to settle down, the thinking mind to settle down. Sometimes we have to give it something to chew on. Maybe it needs to recite Buddha or count or do something to settle down. And I think this is where the practice of noting probably comes in, where people are trying to just calm the mind down enough to be able to be present with the meditation object. And then take notice of how it feels when the mind gets very calm. And also take notice of whether there is this idea in the mind that we have to do something or become something or gain something. Because that energy, that's kind of the energy of our culture.
Mhm.
Everything's about doing something. Well, not
That's
everything.
definitely there. I definitely feel that very strongly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, if we're doing things all day and thinking about all the projects we have, of course, when we sit down to meditate, that's what's going to be going on in the mind. But if we give ourselves more time to maybe do something really simple, useful, and kind of low tech, not something you have to think much about, washing the dishes, sweeping the floor. Some environments are easier than others. If you've got a lot of wood to stack, that's really helpful. But it's giving the mind more opportunity to be calm while the body's active. And maybe there's going to be more calm when you sit down too.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yes, Olivia.
Yeah, thank you for this. I think it was clarifying talk about like kind of more focusing on the diligence piece. That is an interesting direction for me to think about, not just the physical kind of lethargy that we've been talking about. I'm very psychologically minded, and I watch, kind of what works and what doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And have found that for me, and I know this is not true for everyone, for me, if I have like too strict of a mandate, like I must get up at 7 a.m. and immediately meditate and my mind rebels. And it's like, nope. So I can have like this really good intention to like have a lot of enthusiasm, have a lot of excitement. No, like I've noticed, meditating in the morning sets the right tone for the day. Giving myself more time and spaciousness like allows the meditation to go deeper. I'm not as sleepy. Like I know that this is the right time. There's been a lot of experimenting and watching to see that. But if I kind of try to structure it too tightly, I think I feel, some part of me feels cornered and it's like, I'm out. But then the other part of the mind, like that kind of American striving, must accomplish thing comes up for the whole rest of the day. oh, you didn't do it, you should do it now, how about now, how about now? And then that's just this cycle of a light beating up. It's not too serious, but I can see this cycle.
Mhm.
And I know it's really different for different people. Like some people, they can just set a schedule, they figure out that works, and that's it. Or
Mhm.
like if I'm at a monastery or on retreat, I can follow the routine and be perfectly happy and at ease with that. But on my own, there's something about creating that structure that just backfires. So
So does it
I'm
work
kind of
to,
at a loss.
yeah, does it work to be a little less rigid?
It does. But then but then that might mean that some days I still just don't do it. Like it doesn't happen in the morning because I was less rigid, and that meant maybe doing something else first, and then that led to something else. And then,
Yeah.
so it's this weird.
Well, I think it's important to find a way for us to love the meditation.
I do. I don't know. I do. That's
It's
hard.
really hard, isn't it, to know like what the heck is in the way?
Yes.
It's like, and sometimes it helps to make a more general commitment, like, the amount of time you're going to spend meditating in a day, and then make sure that you do that before you sleep at night.
Mm,
But sometimes that doesn't work either. You have to really get to know yourself and kind of the phase you're in to encourage the mind in a good way. I mean, I always laugh and like Ajahn Brahm's way of talking about this, like, if you have a friend and they want to invite you out to meet at the cafe and have tea or coffee or something, but they say, oh, you have to come at exactly this time and you have to have this kind of drink and this is exactly what, and and he says, do you want to go? And it's like, yeah, I want to go. He said, that's the way we treat our mind. We want to force it into this mold, and it doesn't necessarily work. So, the mind, I mean, having raised 2 kids, and I realized that everybody's experience of either raising themselves or raising their children is different, but it's like there is this aspect of just noticing like what is really going to help here. And and maybe it would be helpful to meditate with a group every morning.
mm.
Get your Kalyanamita together and meditate together, and then you're like on the hook. It's like you being at the monastery. You're gonna show
Mhm.
up for puja, because it's happening and you're not gonna miss it. And maybe that would be something that would be useful.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Joyce?
I just want to thank you so much for this talk. This was just amazing. I'm going through a really difficult time, and this is like one of those little unexpected gifts that just landed in my lap. And I've been experiencing a lot of those while I'm dealing with this challenge. And I've been really noticing that it feels like there's a miracle going on. But I don't know why I don't get these things when I first hear them, and the suttas are a big challenge, but this one really, really spoke to me. This is not about doubt in the Buddha. This is more about doubt, self-doubt.
Yeah.
The thing about like uncertain, undecided, lacking confidence. It's about me trying to figure out or push through on our own. I think I'm partly afraid of appearing like ignorant or something, so I don't expose myself, but I don't avail myself of these wonderful opportunities to learn. And also the whole section about, the cultural conditioning, working hard, worry too much, beat ourselves up, not doing enough. But if I'm thinking about not doing enough, I'm not doing anything. because I'm worried about not doing enough. And I don't know how I'm going to really sort this out, but this really seems to be like it's going to be a great tool for my future, my progress on the path. Wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome. And maybe an element that we want to emphasize more is the kindness towards ourselves and kindness towards others. So when the Buddha mentioned that thing about not being upset with your companions in the holy life, it's like we got to not be upset with ourselves. This is number one companion in the holy life. This one right here, you yourself. And also, just that kind of sense of kindness, compassion, forgiveness. When we have that as a basis, it's like there's this blossoming that occurs. The heart really can open. And when we really make that a basis of our thinking, or we bring our minds back to that and bring our hearts back to that kind of orientation and feeling, then I think it helps us drop a lot of the inner criticism, and those two states of mind can't really coexist.
Can I say something?
Yes.
I've actually been working on that, and I'm actually seeing progress, and it might be one reason why I've been open to this.
Yeah.
I've really, really been working on this because I see in my situation, a certain amount of anger arise. And I think I am not going to violate my values, even though in the normal world, maybe anger would be appropriate, whatever that means. But I just absolutely will not violate my values.
Yeah.
I feel very strongly about this, but I don't really have an alternative in mind. And that's what I'm working on. I'm trying to cultivate more of a maybe empathy with the other person, as painful as it is, but I'm really working toward that. Yeah, I can see that would be a great benefit to keep going on that path. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the recommendations of the Buddha when we're struggling in a relationship with someone is to remember that we're both going to die.
Heard that a whole bunch of times recently. I think I'm supposed to really get that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It touched me when I first heard it, and I'm touched again. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Joyce. Ron and Serena.
I related to what Olivia was speaking of, and the things you offered are very helpful. Thank you so much. One thing just very recently that's helping me a lot in this regard, Ajahn Pasana recently offered a quote, and it's interesting how sometimes one thing unlocks so much and frees the heart. It's sort of changed my whole practice. But the quote is, an inward staying, unentangled knowing, all outward going knowing cast aside. And that has done so, reflecting on that has just changed everything in the last few weeks for me. And what I did in regard to what you and Olivia were talking about is I said that in the morning, that as sort of a mantra that I set and reflect on for a few minutes when I wake up as an intention for my day. And often that leads me right there into a little bit of metta, and then often right into the sitting at that time, because I also have a hard time doing it at a set time. So this has helped me a lot.
Lovely. That quote sounds like Upasika Ki Nanyon, which
Yes.
wonderful. If you want to see the books of her translations of her teachings, you can check the Abhayagiri website. I'm sure they're there.
Ajahn Pasana referred me to Access to Insight, put her name in, and he's translated
Okay.
things.
Yeah, good. Good. Thank you, Serena. Josh?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great.
Welcome.
I was having some tech issues this morning.
Okay.
I wanted to thank you so much for today's message. I think what really resonated with me was your the subtopic you had about our conditioning in the West and how we push and always looking for more. And you helped me realize a different part to a lesson that I learned from a friend a little while ago. He served in the Peace Corps, and the culture of the people that were hosting him, it was very common for them to, at the end of their day, they would just go out on their porch and they would just sit. And people would just, come by and sit with them. And, maybe they would exchange a few words, but just sit in silence. And he was very struck by that because he felt so awkward at first. His mind was racing, like, what do I say? What do I do? What do we do? But they would just sit. And I think what was highlighted for me in this lesson was, sometimes maybe that is the right energy. Maybe that is the right effort. We don't need to always think of the next thing, the thing to do. Sometimes we just have to sit with ourselves. And sometimes that's all that's needed. And he said that it was a funny thing. He would think that he wouldn't learn anything about these people by not talking, but somehow by just sitting with them and watching life go by, he felt more connected to them than anyone, here in the States after maybe years of discussing with them. So thank you for the message for today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for that sharing. It reminds me of when I first was in Thailand, and so my son was a monk, in case any of you don't know, and I was staying in a house on the monastery property, but in those early years I was a visiting mother, not coming necessarily as a practitioner. And my son would come to see me with either, one or more monks with him, because he couldn't be alone with the woman, even though she was his mom. And so I got to talk a lot with the monks and ask them a lot of questions. And then, when nobody had anything to say, we were just silent. And I had that kind of like awkward feeling. It's like, oh, I should think of something to ask or something to say, and realizing that it was an act of renunciation to let go of that drive. And when we think about deep meditation, if the inclination of the mind is towards renunciation, towards letting go, that's more beneficial. That actually is what's useful. So sometimes the persistence isn't to do something, it's to not do something. And this can be really helpful. Thank you, Josh. Kate?
Sorry, having difficulty unmuting there.
That's okay.
Yeah, as others have said, I appreciated your talking about this overstriving in the dominant Western culture. And it's something that I've been aware of for a long time, both in the culture and in myself. And I think it has something to do with what an individualistic culture we are and how competition and, you know, kind of dog eat dog thinking is kind of bred into us almost. And one of the ways that it showed up for me for a long time and still does is striving in meditation and striving for making progress on the path, striving for awakening. Even though, as I say that, I think, oh my goodness, that sounds like, you know, too much. But striving to make progress on this path. And I think in the early years that I was meditating, this was, I don't think I realized how much I was striving until I got older. And then the striving kind of look back and see, gosh, I was really trying much too hard. And that very over striving in meditation kind of, as you said, kind of prevents the peace and calm that can come when we don't overstrive. But one of the things that I've reflected on is, when does, you know, a wholesome desire to practice, to make progress on the path, when does what I might call a wholesome desire, when is it become a craving to make progress? And do you have any wisdom about how to distinguish between a desire to make progress on the path and a kind of gripping to make progress on the path?
Yeah, it's by the measure of dukkha. You know, when it becomes craving and gripping, and that it's suffering, you can feel the difference. When it's a wholesome desire, it's invigorating and enlivening and encouraging. And when it tips into suffering, or, I mean, suffering's not always the best translation of dukkha, but when it's dukkha, then we know it's not in the wholesome range anymore. So it's how it feels. And when we notice that shift, the other thing that's involved in it, of course, is the sense of self.
Yeah.
So we see that, you know, I'm actually uncomfortable. I'm actually not happy. I'm actually not inspired. I'm just pushing. I'm just, you know, grasping. And it's because I'm trying to become something, be, and continue to be. And I'm not just opening up to the force of the Dhamma, to the miracle, like Joyce is having these miracles. This is the training. This is the training. And, you know, then what do we do when we notice this dukkha? Well, there's the first three noble truths. You sit down and observe it. You recognize, come to understand it. You know, we come to understand, why am I trying so hard? We all have a long history of that conditioning. And that idea that somehow I'm going to be okay if I work hard enough.
Yeah.
People are going to respect me if I work hard enough. Or whatever it is. And then, oh yeah, there's that. That's what's under this. When we understand that, we can have compassion, and we can, you know, see that there's another way. And when that really does resolve in the heart, then we feel the cessation of that dukkha.
I thank you. I've certainly found that holding that dukkha with compassion and kindness helps a lot. But that over striving, you know, it comes back in meditation. It's so, it can be so sneaky.
Yes.
And sometimes very subtle,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
and I really have to be honest with myself. And,
Yes.
and getting a much greater appreciation of the need to be scrupulously honest with myself.
Yes. Yes. That's exactly right. That's what this path requires, to be, I sometimes think, brutally honest, really, really honest with ourselves, because otherwise it's just, it's such a barrier. Yeah. Yeah, very, very honest. And the more we become honest with ourselves, really show up as it is, the better we actually feel.
Yeah.
It's like getting over that awkwardness of sitting in silence together. You know, I can I can really, really own, really be, really admit what it actually is like. And then can actually put it down.
I appreciate your words. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Kate.